Coming up on this week's show, how to play retro PC games officially on your iPhone.
A long-lost Dreamcast game emerges.
And turning your retro hobby into a career with Bart van den Akker.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you every Friday with our incredible friends at Bitmap Books. Now, remember those days when you were a kid, walking into the game shop and checking out that incredible artwork on video games? This book, The Art of the Box, celebrates the people who made that possible. Legends like Bob Wakelin, and it weighs in at a massive 564 pages, of course, with those incredible full-colour images that Bitmap Books are famous for. You can check out The Art of the Box and the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 438, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Rabbi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And very nice of you joining us for our weekly geek out about all things retro, classic video games, old school consoles, technology, computers. This is what we do every single Friday, and we love it, don't we? Bringing it up to speed on what's been happening in the world of retro from over the last week, and of course bringing you a special guest onto the podcast each week. Now, often when we do panels and, occasionally people like to interview us guys. Believe it or not, we have actually been on a few other podcasts. And the question I often get asked, I don't know about you guys, is how big is your retro collection? How many systems and computers have you got? I mean, at a rough guess, what would you say, Joe? How many consoles would you say you've got?
Consoles? Ooh, I don't actually know. I've got a little over 1,000 games.
Yeah.
Consoles, probably in the 20s, maybe up to 30s.
Which isn't too wild. Yeah, I mean, I think at last count mine was probably around 80 systems.
Yeah.
But that was probably around a decade ago.
I've massively cut down mine, so 8 probably.
Yeah,
together
I remember when you did that.
Systems and consoles, yeah.
You started buying more, though. You got a classic Mac and an ST in the last year.
Sure.
Well, our guest on the podcast this week, he had a collection of 40 systems by the time he was 16.
Yeah.
Which is quite impressive.
Wow. He had quite a huge collection, but what he did with it was pretty amazing. You know, he's basically turned it into a complete museum as it's grown. And the thing that I like about this museum is, we've got lots of museums in the UK, and a lot of them celebrate the kind of UK machine. Well, this museum's the HomeComputerMuseum in the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands they had a very different kind of computer world to it. Like the MSX was quite popular over there. There was all these little corners of different computer cultures, and I think this museum embraces all of them, but does it in a really cool style. Like they call it an interactive computer museum. So they've got this setup where they've got like 90s bedrooms, and in there you can go on MSN Messenger. It's working. They've got like AI in the Messenger as well, so you can actually chat with like Clippy off Microsoft Word. They've got a kind of time machine on the internet as well, where you can go back and use it like it was, back in the days, and it'll bring up the old web pages from the Wayback Machine. And I think the whole kind of experience of it is really interesting, but also for new generations and kind of nostalgic people as well.
I think you're right there, because we chatted to our guest Bart this week, who founded the HomeComputerMuseum in Helmond in the Netherlands. Been open for around 6 years now. And I remember meeting Bart, I think it would have been the first time we met him, at the Amiga 30 event in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And then I saw him at a few other events over the years, and he had this idea, because again, like many of us, he had this retro collection. He got rid of it all for a while and then kind of accidentally fell back into it. And it got a bit out of hand. I think he'd admit himself, he started buying loads of these systems, filling up his living room with them as well. And then it eventually got to the stage where he thought, well, look, I've got enough of these. Let's turn it into a museum. But you're right. The thing that he does really well with it is it's not just a random collection of old computers dumped in a room. It is the full experience. Like you said, he's got like a 70s area where everything in there, from the wallpaper, the bedding on the bed. He said you open the desk, which is an authentic late 70s desk. In the drawer, there is a magazine from the late 70s. It's like if the year is 1978, literally everything is period correct and from that era. So really it's giving, people that weren't there. I mean, none of us experienced the year 1978. But if you go there, I think that's going to be seeing these machines in the context of when they were released. I think that gives it a whole new dimension.
Yeah, it's just like some of the stuff there as well. He's got, the world's largest collection of boxed PC games, the largest collection of CDI, also Philips computers and Tulip computers. So, there's all these different types of machines. And I kind of think, you see consoles and stuff a lot in these museums as well. But computing is a whole world that needs to be celebrated, and there's interesting things we discussed in the interview as well, stuff like piracy as well. And how
that was a big part of computing history, whether you like it or not, wasn't it? So yeah, really important to cover it. So I guess this week, if you ever wondered about making money and starting a business off your retro computer collection, you're going to hear how he did it, and also some of the incredible experiences that you can check out if you're over in Helmond in the Netherlands. If you're not, it's definitely worth the trip out there with our guest Bart van der Akker. He's coming up on the show in around half an hour from now. Now, of course, you know the way it works. First half of the podcast, this is when we bring you up to speed on what's been happening over the last 7 days in retro. And actually, this first story kind of follows on quite nicely from something we were talking about last week. Now, this is where we're talking about the fact that the GameCube has now got achievements in its games, thanks to a achievement system for emulation. And I was talking about the fact that it would be cool if that was on the original hardware. Then we got into a bit of a discussion about whether or not, how big the original GameCube online scene was. Because, I'll admit, I didn't have a GameCube back then. I've got one now, picked it up for about 15 quid from GameStation about 10 years ago. I know you're a GameCube kid, Joe, but you didn't have a modem back in the day. I looked it up since as well. There's only like a handful of games, I think 8 or 9 games that actually were online enabled on the GameCube, but it does appear that there were, a community of people who loved playing them. And if that was you, this story actually dropped on the same day that we released that episode last week, typically. This is GCNet, a brand new GameCube network adapter that fits nicely into your GameCube's memory card slot and lets you play it online again.
Yeah, so interestingly, this, like you say, it plugs into the memory card slot. It then creates a Ethernet port for your GameCube, so it actually plugs in via the Ethernet, which it pretty cool, pretty old school as well, which I like.
I love the click of Ethernet ports, when they go in and that little latch goes...
Unless you've smashed the lead and then
it just falls out.
Keep it in there, and it pulls out. And
definitely done that before. Ravi did point out that, these kind of devices have been around for a while for the GameCube. They've been done before, but this was more of a kind of affordable solution for it. So Neostormer have put it out for $44. It is sold out already. Like, it did immediately sell out.
Well, I saw that they had the broadband adapters. They were quite expensive, and we covered it a while ago ETH to GC Sidecar, which was like they had an open source version of it as well, and this was basically one that you'd stick at the bottom. And I was wondering, that's $44 as well. I was wondering what the difference is between this and that, and I've worked it out. I think the ETH to GC was compatible with GameCube models that had the serial port 2 at the bottom,
right? Yeah.
Where this one can just be plugged into the memory card, so it can be used on any GameCube model.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, because of some models had all the different. Well, I don't know if all of them had it, but then just had different ports. But yeah, you can take the different compartments off the bottom of the GameCube, and there's all sorts under there.
Yeah, so I assume the other one used the serial port. This one's just going straight through the memory card slot. Yeah, it's emulating a broadband adapter using Swiss, which is the environment for the GameCube, which is really good, kind of like a Swiss Army knife. It's got everything in there that you need.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So there is a list of games here that it supports. I did grow up with a GameCube. It was my main console, but I don't even think you could do online in the UK, to be perfectly honest. Shoot me if I'm wrong. But it supports about 8 or 9 games. So 1080 Avalanche, Homeland. I don't want to completely butcher this name, but Jakuyo Powerful Pro Yakura 10, Kirby Air Ride, Mario Kart Double Dash, Phantasy Star Online 1 and 2, Phantasy Star Episode 1 and 2 Plus, and Phantasy Star Online Episode 3 Card Revolution for the games it supports. I don't know if the GameCube did support games online than that originally, but that's what this works on.
Phantasy Star makes sense. That was such a big online game on the Dreamcast, wasn't it? That was like the only one that I saw people really play, that and Quake.
Well, I think, you'd have a few people online playing it because there's been solutions to kind of play these online nowadays, but it also supports LAN multiplayer, which I think is a really cool feature. So you can set up a GameCube LAN and then play locally with your friends, which I think is pretty cool.
Now, one thing they're saying is, I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking how amazing it would be to play Mario Kart Double Dash online on a GameCube. That is something I've never experienced, playing over the internet. That'd be awesome. But the one thing they are saying, which may be different to the ones that use the expansion slot, is you can't actually basically stream ISO games from network attached storage. For example, if you, I think you do this on your PlayStation 2, don't you, Revy? You've got kind of your games on your NAS on your network and you stream them.
I can kind of connect and stuff, but it has got like Samba, so you could probably send them down the line.
Well,
but
they're saying that it's too slow.
Yeah.
So it's saying basically the speed of the memory card adapter prohibits that. It's not quick enough to basically keep up with it loading an ISO file from a NAS. But, I mean, I think, for the price, and if you just want a way to... I mean, again, when you play these games online now, it generally is by appointment, isn't it? You go on forums and people are like, right, we're all going on Saturday night, 8 p.m. You'll go online, then there'll be like 10 people playing. Not the kind of thing where you'll go on and get matchmate with someone at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning.
Yeah, but usually. Also you could go to a retro gaming show and they could have like 8 of them set up, all connected together, and then everyone just sits down and plays. That would be really cool. Yeah, for like LAN parties and that kind of thing. I mean, I remember one of the most fun kind of multiplayer experiences we had at retro events was when us guys jumped on a 8-player Mario Kart, didn't we, at some event that was projected onto a brick wall. Yeah, really I remember that. We were there for hours,
Yeah, so, very cool to see, though. And I think, again, it's a system that I've never played online before, so I'm quite interested in getting hold of one of these. So it would be nice to experience that. Like we did say, they have sold out, though, but apparently there is going to be another run of them coming soon. So if you want to check that out, I'll link up the website and, of course, the rest of the stories in this week's show notes. Now, while we're talking about games that were played online in this era, this game sounded extremely ambitious. This could have been, if not the first, but definitely one of the very earliest, massively multiplayer online games. And this would have run on the Dreamcast. This is a game called Far Nation.
I'd never heard of this. So this is apparently a legendary game, in the Dreamcast world. It was first revealed in August 2000 by GameSpot. And like you say, it's meant to be a open world, massive multiplayer online game. It was only ever a few screenshots of the game released. And then in 2001, kind of, the demise of the Dreamcast, etc., they said that the game had been moved to the Xbox for development. And then it just never came out, vaporware, etc. Legendary game. But this last week, somebody has posted 3 1-minute videos of footage of the game. Apparently, he's got the demo disc from somebody who worked for Sega at the time. And that's how they've got a hold of it. And he's saying there's going to be more to come. He will release more videos. Because although the videos are all about a minute long, most of them only actually show about 10 seconds of gameplay.
A lot of menus in it.
A lot of menus. So the second video, admittedly, is just going through textures. Like in-game textures to the game. But for such a apparently kind of legendary, iconic game, doesn't look very interesting, to be perfectly honest.
I guess because it's like an online world and no one's there. It might be more interesting with other characters, but it seems that there were a few copies that kind of went around to magazines and stuff, like back in the days, and a few people had a demo, but it does look a bit bland, doesn't it?
Well, apparently there were some big plans for it. They were saying that it would be basically an online persistent world that would be living 24/7.
Right.
Players could come online, interact with each other. You could build structures as well. Apparently there's some kind of crafting inside the game. So you could, do buildings and that kind of thing. And apparently there was trading that was going to be involved in the game as well, in like, the shared virtual environment, so you could swap and trade and barter with other players and stuff as well. Kind of remind, it sounds a bit like maybe an early attempt at something like Second Life.
Yeah, it does remind me of that, actually, even down to kind of the footage that's shown as well. You've got just a guy in some red pants and some red shorts just walking around a bit of a barren desert, and the guys who are playing it are trying to figure out if you can jump or anything, and they manage to punch a door of a building they come across. That's about as much as they managed to do from playing the game. But like you say, I guess, there would have been a lot more to do, and you could have gone around and spoke to people and crafted and I imagine maybe farmed stuff. That looks like
there's some other screenshots, and they're kind of like you can choose a male or female character as well, and it very much looks like a Street Fighter kind of character in a leotard, and then you've got like a big chat system as well, and some emoticons that you could use in there. But it's in Japanese. It doesn't look that developed, and it looks very demo-y, doesn't it? Textures look nice though.
Yeah, it does look nice. And again, like you said, the fact that there's nobody playing it online, the world is not living, it is probably going to be a very dull experience without that. And they're saying there's actually a part in it where he goes into like the server settings in the video, and he says, the servers that it was once set up to connect to are long gone. They've been offline for decades now. But he is saying there are a few people in the comments of the video, actually there's a few of them going, fake. And this guy's like, I spent all weekend just faking this up, whatever. But then other people are saying, any chance that this will ever see the light of day on maybe archive.org or something like that, so we can all play it. So he said he's looking into doing that at the moment.
Okay.
So this could be something that maybe we'll be able to get our hands on. Like you said, it doesn't seem like you can do much in it, but I'm thinking if the code does get out there and people can reverse engineer it and maybe get this running in emulation, maybe, depending on how much of it has been completed. I mean, I'm not really sure how finished this kind of was at this stage, or whether it is just basically, like you said, a guy running around an environment, whether the back end of it's all been coded or how much of it actually exists kind of remains to be seen. But if there is enough there to get like a playable world out of it, I mean, I imagine that once it's out there, people will make that happen. Like you said last week, Ravi, if any community will do it, it'll be the Dreamcast community.
Definitely. And they have been making games with, online functions and capabilities recently.
Yeah, so it looks very cool. So if you want to check out those videos so far, I'll put that Reddit thread in this week's show notes too. Now, we've all got Netflix accounts. You guys know you can play games on Netflix.
I knew you could play, what was it called? That, it was about a year ago, and it was the game where you just answered questions, like, against each other.
Oh, like a quiz thing.
Oh, Quizmaster or something like that.
Quizmaster, there was something like that, and played it for like one evening once with the missus. But other than that, no, I didn't. And apparently there's quite a few.
Well, I've been looking through, and I didn't know this either, because I must admit, when I watch Netflix, I generally watch it either just on my smart TV app or on a PlayStation. Don't really watch it on my phone all that much.
I've kind of, the only game I've ever played has been Bandersnatch. That's the one, yeah.
Well, there is, if you open the mobile app, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be groaning and be like, everybody knows this. Grand Theft Auto. San Andreas is on there. You've got Sonic Mania Plus Edition. Load of classic games. Yeah, GTA 3, the definitive edition, is on there as well.
Shredder's Revenge. I'm looking now.
Yeah.
Which, wait a second.
We missed all these, Joe.
Yeah.
There are loads of them on here. And, I mean, my idea of, and we'll go into why we're talking about this in just a moment. I mean, a lot of these look like basically what would have been crappy browser-based Flash games back in the day. Some don't look that ambitious. But when you have got games like Sonic Mania and GTA in here as well, I must admit it is a little bit more fully featured than I expected. But the reason this has been making the headlines in the retro community over the last week or so is that now Netscape have reimagined Minesweeper, and that's available to play on the Netflix mobile app.
Guys, I've got GTA on my phone.
I just want to play.
This was a thing.
I just want to play.
Nothing else came out of this story.
Too Hot to Handle. Love is a Game, which looks like a Love Island.
That's Ravi's weekend taken up. But I mean, first of all, I've got to say thank you to Engadget who covered this story for drawing my attention to this massive library of games that I could have installed, not for free, but included in my subscription, with Netflix, but also for me downloading this version of Minesweeper and for the first time in 30 years, actually understanding how to play Minesweeper.
Yeah,
because there's a tutorial and it walks you through how to play it.
I do know how to play Minesweeper, luckily. But yeah, it looks like a very fresh, nice version of Minesweeper. You know, the graphically, in terms of like, let's say the skins, but graphically in terms of kind of like the
textures and everything.
The textures and everything like that. It does look really nice. It looks a little bit better than one of those Flash games that you're on about, to be honest. But yeah, it looks good. There's even like a journey mode, like a story mode campaign on there, which is quite interesting.
I find there's something incredibly depressing about it, which is that, they're advertising here, no in-game ads, and they're advertising no extra fees, no in-app purchases. And to me, that shows how bad mobile phone games have got. Like, that's a kind of thing to be like, oh, come and look at this. There's no in-game ads and stuff. And, I've used like loads of free apps. Everyone uses that. And it's just constantly trying to sell you something, barrage you with something. And I just find it odd that that's like a way to advertise it in something that's appealing.
It's an interesting point, that, because we've all got these, basically powerful little computers in our pockets 24/7 now, and we're all iPhone users, us three guys. And I remember when Apple launched the arcade service, the online play on iPhones. I've never used that, and it's weird because when I first got an iPhone, I remember buying a bunch of games for it. I got like the Pinball Fantasies and Pinball Dreams versions I did. Got a feeling I had Flashback on there for a while as well, and I went through a stage maybe in my first year or two when the App Store launched of actually buying quite a few games. Didn't play them all that often. I don't think I played a game on my phone for maybe about 10 years.
Yeah, I always, whenever I purchase something from Apple, which would be pretty rare because, it's quite expensive, you get like a couple of months free on the arcade, and I'd look at it and I go, meh. Even though there's some all right titles on there, it's just...
I wonder why that is.
I don't know.
I wonder if are we alone in that? I mean, do you play games on your phone, Joe? Apart from,
no.
I know we do stuff like Pokemon Go and stuff you guys have got into,
And we get told off at work, wouldn't we?
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm the same as you, Dan. Had a few games in the past, but probably Pokemon Go was probably the last game I played for which was 2016.
Yeah,
and when I say I played it for like a couple of days, when it was
not like
no, I was literally out at 4 a.m, like fighting other Pokemon Go people. Like, I took it too far.
But yeah, no, I played Angry Birds and stuff like that. When I first got an iPhone 3 was my first iPhone. Angry Birds. I'm trying to think of some of the others, classic, Flappy Bird and stuff like that. But they were probably the only games I ever really played on it, and then the novelty kind of wore off, after a few years. But this might draw me back in, just looking through these games now. I'm like, I could play these on my lunch break at work.
Yeah, it is crazy, isn't it? Because, I always take my Switch if I'm going anywhere. But, I could just use my iPhone. You could even hook up like a Bluetooth controller to it, It's easy enough to do to get that experience, but it's just something that never really appeals to me all that much. But then again, I'm looking through this catalogue of games on there now, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I will download, a few of the classic GTAs for those occasions when I'm somewhere and I've got nothing to do.
God, it's going to be trying to do that like level on GTA where you've got the little planes and you've got to drop the bombs. That's hard enough to do.
With a touchscreen.
On the PC, doing that on the mobile, it's just going to be insane.
Yeah. There are only certain types of games that work on touchscreens. A lot of them didn't translate all that well, which could be something else that put me off playing them, even though I know that you can hook controllers up. But, generally haven't got a pro controller in my back pocket when I'm out and about. Maybe that's a reason. But yeah, so there, if you ever wanted to play Minesweeper on the go, there is a meme, isn't there, on Facebook? It's, if you guys have seen this, it's like, kids today will never know how to play this because neither did we. And it's a picture of Minesweeper.
Nice.
Which again was one of those, I clicked around in it a few times, never really knew how to play it all that much. So that's something new I've learned today. So if you want to play Minesweeper on the go, that is available now on the Netflix app on your phone. Now, while we're talking about phone apps, or smoothly flowing into each other this week's stories, aren't they? Something else that you might find on your iPhone this week, if you have a little look around the App Store, is the first, they're saying this is the first approved PC emulator for iOS, because there has been emulators that have made it onto the store before and then they've got taken down. And we had that story going back a few months now where it is official that Apple are now allowing emulators onto the App Store without really the limitations that they were imposing before. And this one looks really powerful. It hasn't got the catchiest name in the world, if I'm honest. This is called UTM-SE.
Yeah, so this is the first PC emulator where you can kind of have an environment on there, a virtual machine. You can run DOS, you can play some of your classic DOS titles in there. And I think that's quite cool. There's been a few things that have not allowed emulators to work, and that's Apple's kind of approach to it. That it's the walled garden with Apple. They don't want unsigned code to be run on there. People have jailbroke stuff before and put emulators on, but having it go through the official store is one thing. But also it's been the European Commission as well. So they were only allowed to have retro game emulators previously, not PC emulators, because they didn't count as retro game emulator. It was kind of a computer emulator. So Apple was scared of a potential backlash and threat from the European Commission if they had PC emulators on there. But now they're allowed to do it, but also they're not allowed to have JIT, which is just in time compilers on there, which means that they run a lot faster. So you're going to get slower kind of virtual machines in there. You're not going to get huge fast ones and be able to run the latest version of Windows on your machine.
Well, apparently you say that. Apparently you can run Windows 11 on this.
I guess, but it won't be just in time. It'll be pretty slow.
Yeah, I mean, not going to be the equivalent of running
then,
on your
then
i9
you can
based
use
PC.
Parallels or something if you really want to do it. But on an iPad or something, it's not going to be an amazing experience, or on an iPhone. But I think this is really cool. You can also run Linux in there, which is pretty cool. You have Windows XP stuff. It's a start, isn't it? And it just goes back to that thing. Do you use it? Casual gaming iPhone, do you use it? Us guys don't, but I could see it more on an iPad because the screen's quite big, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got an iPad that I use. I mean, I've tried to use an iPad as a MacBook replacement. I still find it annoys me in some ways using it as a computer. But I do have a Bluetooth mouse attached to it and a keyboard, which makes it a lot more usable. But yeah, I mean, running on an iPad, I think this would be the best way to do it, because this is actually based on the, I think it's called the QEMU emulator, which I've used before. And actually it's a bit more versatile than it might first appear. I mean, you can do the old MS-DOS and, Windows XP and all that running on here as well. But you can also run Mac OS 9 on here too. Cool. It runs PowerPC. RISC-V emulation is built in too. And I know recently they've got stuff like Amiga OS 4 and Morphos running on QEMU. So I'm wondering whether that could be possible.
Yeah,
to run those on your
and also,
on your iPad.
we're iPhone users. We apologise for that, but there's some Android ones out there as well.
They've been out for years.
They've been out for years, and they're much more developed as well. Magic DOSBox seems to be really popular one, or DOSBox Turbo as well. So check them out, because playing some old PC games on the move, pretty cool.
Yeah, so when stories like this come up, that Android users laugh at iOS users oh yeah, we were doing this 10 years ago.
You've only just got icons.
Yeah, exactly. So but that is cool to see on there. And I think the fact that running PowerPC Mac operating systems and stuff, which opens up some really interesting emulation options as well. Or if you just want to run your old DOS games on the go on your iPad, that is available for free on the App Store now. And there are a few pre-installed environments that you can download as well. So I'll link up that in the show notes as well. Now, you were all over this one, Joe. We keep talking about the fact that this does feel like the second golden age of the beat 'em up. And this one is basically, if you loved the 80s Karate Kid movies, and who didn't, there's going to be a proper old school 16-bit style brawler coming up for Xbox, PlayStation, Switch and PC.
This is a Karate Kid Street Rumble, which is going to be coming to us on the 20th of September this year. PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, PC, etc. Ravi actually sent this one over to
Daniel-san.
And I was
you were like, put it in.
Yeah, put it in, get it in the news. You're 100% right. It is definitely the resurgence of beat 'em ups at the moment. belt scrollers. I love in this article they call it a belt scroller as well. It's definitely my word of the year at the moment. I'm surprised in terms of actually based on Karate Kid, because we got some Cobra Kai games.
Did you get any of those? Did you play them?
I did, actually. We're going off on a tangent here, but I did play the first Cobra Kai game on Xbox One because I wanted something two-player to play with my wife, and she really got into it. It wasn't a particularly good game. It was like a cell-shaded beat-em-up belt scroller.
Right, okay.
And she loved it. So I was like, all right, I get to game with my wife every night. Like, I'm down with this.
Was it on Game Pass? I remember seeing it, but I don't think I downloaded it.
It might have been. Yeah. It might have been how we played it, or I might have just picked it up for a tenner or something. And then they did a sequel to it. The first one being based on the first couple of seasons of Cobra Kai. I'm assuming the second one, the later couple of seasons. And you could play as either like, which dojo did you want to, play as? It was pretty fun. Yeah. But this one is based on the original Karate Kid, movie from the 80s. There's nothing to do with Cobra Kai, the series. But interestingly, this is only the third game to ever come out that was based on Karate Kid, which really surprised me. So you got the NES one for Karate Kid 1, and then for Karate Kid 2, there was actually an Amiga and Atari ST game. And now this is the third one, apparently. I really like the art style of this. Pixel style 16-bit graphics. It doesn't look like kind of like Final Fight or Streets of Rage or anything. It looks more like Double Dragon. Yeah. To me, it definitely looks like Double Dragon Gaiden that came out earlier this year or the back end of last year. I don't know if any of you saw that. A little bit more kind of chibi style, cartoony kind of style. I really like the look of it. I think it looks
better than the cutesy kind of stuff. No.
You're not a fan of that, are you?
I like this. It's a bit more real.
Yeah, it looks a bit more real, a little bit more bloody and brutal. It looks fun. It looks like it's going to be 4-player as well. From the looks of things, it doesn't actually.
Yeah, it's got.
It is, but it looks like it is.
Daniel LaRusso, Danny, of course, the original one, Daniel's son, and Mr. Miyagi, Ali Mills as well, and Kumiko as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So,
the fourth.
Yeah, so it's Ali off the second film,
Yes,
and then you're fighting Johnny, John Kreese, and Terry Silver.
Yeah, absolutely. There we go. Classic. It's coming to us from Game Mill Entertainment, who I've just looked into, and they did actually do the other Cobra Kai games that my wife loves, so maybe she'll love this. So they've obviously got the license, and they've just taken it in a different direction for this one, which I think is the right call, especially with a lot of these games, coming out in the last couple of years. But it looks like as a development company, as a developer, they mainly do licensed games. They've done like Cartoon Network games, Nickelodeon games, SpongeBob SquarePants, Goosebumps, etc. That looks like
Scott Pilgrim as well.
And that's what they're good at. Yeah, Scott Pilgrim was a really good game. Actually, the beat 'em up of that was a really fun game, and it does look very similar to this. So yeah, I'll be there on the 20th of September playing this one.
And it looks like they've got. I mean, as soon as you get into the trailer, it's only 50 seconds long, but Daniel does the crane. It's like one of his special moves, and I see, Johnny's in there as well, sweeping the leg, so all the moves that you'd expect the characters to do, it looks like they are. Interesting to see, like, you mentioned about, fighting Kreese and stuff like that. I imagine they're probably going to be like end-of-level bosses.
Yeah.
Which would be
absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, you can play as Miyagi as well, by the looks of it.
Yeah, you can, yeah.
Yeah, so, that it looks incredible, I've got to say. And, I'm loving the fact that, these beat-em-up games are just so popular again right now. And the fact that they're basing them all on franchises that we grew up with, I think they're definitely aiming them squarely at us. It feels like, we are the generation of gamers who are playing all these games again. So if you want to play another classic beat-em-up based on an old-school franchise, 16-bit style Karate Kid is coming in September. You can check out that trailer. I'll put it in everything else we talk about. You don't have to Google around. You'll find it all in this week's show notes. Now, we're going to be talking to this week's special guest, talking about turning your retro hobby into a full-time career with our guest, Bart van der Akker. He's coming up on the show in just a moment. But before we do that, let's take a quick second to give a massive thank you to this week's sponsor. It is our wonderful friends at... It's the one with the catchy sound effect. It's our mates at Shopify. Now, you've heard us talking about Shopify before, I'm sure, and it is such an impressive platform. If you're selling anything at all online at the moment, I've got mates who make, custom T-shirts that they sell on there as well. Rather, you're going to be setting up a store to sell our books on there.
I'm hoping that we can go online in the next couple of weeks because, a lot of people have been asking about our books, and I think this is the perfect platform to do it as well, because you can do digital delivery, but you can also do actual real products as well.
Yeah, so if you wanted to get hold of a Retro Hour book, look out for our Shopify store. They will be going live very soon. Of course, we'll announce it on the podcast as well. We obviously want to use Shopify. They've been a big supporter of this podcast, and they are the perfect platform for it as well. The all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. So if you sell anything, whether it's in person or online, because they do those little handy shop front ready point of sale systems as well that you can take to events and that kind of thing, to take card payments, and selling online. They even help you with social media marketplaces, your Facebook, your Instagram, your TikTok as well. And they've got industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth every step of the way and give you full control over your business. Best thing is, you don't have to learn any new skills. No coding, no design, anything like that. And they've got a really extensive business course library, full support available as well. So Shopify is there to support your success every step of the way. So if you sell anything, it is time to get serious today. So why don't you try our exclusive offer? Now, if you head to this URL, they'll know that we sent you. It'll really help out the podcast. Shopify.co.uk/retro hour. All lowercase. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Shopify.co.uk/retro hour. If you use that link, you can try out Shopify for just £1 a month on a trial period. It's a no-brainer. Give it a try today and take your business to the next level. And get ready to hear a lot more of this. All right, then. Well, thank you for checking out the news this week. We'll have more, of course, next Friday on the podcast. And next, stand by, special guest on the way, talking about turning retro into a full-time career with the wonderful Bart van der Akker. He's coming up next on the Retro Hour podcast. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time to welcome on this week's special guest. Now, today, we're going to be chatting to someone who I think we first met at the Amiga 30 event in Amsterdam back in 2015. And back then, when I first met Bart, he had this idea of turning his very impressive home computer collection into a full-time living. And not only has he managed to do that, make it his full-time career, but also you can go and check it out as well, because he's got one of Europe's biggest home computer collections at the HomeComputerMuseum in Helmond in the Netherlands. So to find out how he did that, and also obviously to completely geek out about these machines that he's got in his collection as well, let's welcome on our guest this week, Bart van der Akker. How's it going, Bart?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
Very good, thank you. And thanks so much for coming on and chatting about this incredible place that you've built, which if people haven't been to, obviously, I'll put a link to it in the show notes so they can click through to your website and check out some of the virtual exhibitions on there, and hopefully come along in person at some point as well. But I mean, before we get into the incredible things that you've been doing out there in the Netherlands, let's get a bit of background on you, because we always find it interesting to chat to our guests about their kind of early days and how they got the bug. So do you remember your earliest computer memory then, where your journey began?
My personal journey began with Tandy TRS-80 Color Computer 2.
Nice.
Yeah, that's 4 or 5 years old when we got that computer from an uncle of mine. And we're talking about 1986, 87-ish. And the computer was outdated already. So great. So we got this computer, which is, quite popular in the US. But in the Netherlands, it was popular for, I guess, 2 weeks or so. Because nobody else who I knew had a Tandy TRS-80 Color Computer 2, except a few of my uncles. But we got this computer, and it had these books with it, learning basic programming with Tandy TRS-80, the color computer version at least. And, me being a 5-year-old, I started to copy those programs and eventually started to learn more and more about this computer. And of course, playing games, which I had to load from a cassette, obviously.
Well, we always got these kind of hand-me-down computers, when did you get your own personal one that you kind of really wanted?
Well, I think the same uncle a few years later gave us a 386, which is, again, way outdated already by the time we got it. And I started playing with that one, and I soon discovered the fact that you can do similar programming on it with Quick Basic. So in all my knowledge I thought I had, I decided to start C programming, which was kind of too far ahead. And then I went back to Borland Pascal. And by that time, I was interested in, electronics. I wanted to become a DJ. I love to play music and, having these stereos and cassette recorders. And I always wanted to have a CD player. Mm-hmm. But my parents didn't have a CD player, nor did they buy one for me. So I needed to buy one, but all these CD players were way out of reach for my allowance I got. So the only thing I could imagine on the way from school to home, I always passed a thrift shop. And every single day I went to that thrift shop just to see if they had a CD player, which I could afford.
Right.
Which never happened. But at some point I saw this computer, and it was a Philips P2000C. I remember that because it was a beautiful looking. I really found the computer itself was attracting to me. It's like, this is something special. And yeah, I kind of wanted, let's try to do something with it. So I asked, can I turn it on? Sure, go ahead. So there I was in the corridor of between all the other electronics. I was sitting there with some power plug and pushing in that computer, which had no discs whatsoever together. So it was only the computer itself with a keyboard and a carry case. So I booted up the computer. It says system disk, ? So I went home, and I was about 9 years old or something like that. So I went home and I created a MS-DOS 5¼ inch boot disk. Next day I went to school, and from school I went home and to that thrift shop again, tried this disk, which didn't work because it's a Z80, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I couldn't, and I tried other discs, and I created some other discs. And again, this is way before the internet, and there was no way I could get information. So at some point, my dad said, I have a coworker who's into computers. Maybe he can help. So he asked his coworker, and he said, no, I don't know anything about this old computer. Perhaps you should contact the P2000 club in the Netherlands. So I got the phone number, and I called them up. Explaining who I was, and I was this 9-year-old guy with this old computer from 1985, trying to get. And he was so enthusiastic, that guy. He said, "You know what? I'm going to send you everything I have of this computer, so you can boot it. With only if you become member of our club." So
right.
Sure, I did. So I received this whole package with discs and all kinds of documentation. I went back to that thrift shop. I put in a disc, started it up, and there it was. CPM booted. And I could start play games. And it was like, this is great. So I decided to buy it at that point. I paid 25 guilders, which is around 25 euro. And I dragged it home on my bike because, I'm Dutch. So I drag things around on bikes, even if they weigh 12 kilos. And so I dragged it home and I started playing with it. And that's the computer where I started to learn to program on in Borland Pascal. So I went to these gatherings and, getting the interest and creating my own programs, which were ridiculous programs. But, it was fun to be this young guy doing something with this old computer. And it was really interesting.
That kind of started a lifelong love affair then with computers, did it?
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, at some point, people saw, oh, you like old computers? I have some old computers. Yeah, by the time I was 16, I owned 40 computers.
Oh, wow.
All in my bedroom. So my parents didn't like that very much.
But it was nice and cozy in the winter.
Yeah, that was true. But I do remember one thing, and it was, I think, 1994-ish. So I had all these computers. I had MSX. I had the Philips P2000. I had the Tandy, of course, because I never throw that away. I had some 386 and a 486. And then somebody gave me an Amiga 600. Mm-hmm. Well, given the fact what I just called you, all these computers I had, which were all 8-bit computers, and at a maximum 16 colors you could do on an MSX. So that was kind of baffling for me. And then I took up this Amiga 600, and there was a disc with it, and it says, how it's called, Super Frog.
Yes.
So I put in the disc Super Frog, and I started up. And the intro of Super Frog, mm-hmm. That blew me away. The
That was a similar experience to I had, because I played, Bart versus the Space Mutants. That was the first disc I booted up on the Amiga. And I had a Commodore Plus 4 before that, and just seeing actual animation on a computer, it just felt like I'd jumped about 5 generations.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Yeah, of course, I had already, at the time, I think a 486. No, it was a 386. I still had. Yeah. But yeah, having, it could support, it did more colors. So it was, I understand that. But it was an older computer, and this old computer looked way better than the 386 I had. When it comes to graphics and with audio. So I was completely blown away. So yeah, that's where the love for Amiga started for me. And I got myself an Amiga 500. I got a CDTV complete. And I think those were, and the 1200.
Yes. I was going to ask actually about the scene in the Netherlands, because we've heard the MSX was a big platform out there. It sounded like you were making contact with other computer users at the time as well. What was kind of the scene like in the Netherlands when you were growing up?
It's an interesting fact, and it's something I quite recently discovered about the Netherlands. Right now when I do a tour in the museum, I always state the following, that there are basically 3 countries that created the computer history. And of course the US, because most manufacturers are US based. I'm talking Atari, I'm talking Commodore. Those are all US based. Intel, of course, Apple, all those kind of companies. But also the UK, because they made computers cheap with Sinclair and with New Brain and Amstrad and all those, Acorn eventually. And the Netherlands, because they were the first to actually use computers. And what happened in the Netherlands is basically we got all computers created from the US, all computers created from the UK, and we had our own computers. So we had basically 3 countries of computers inside one country. That means that in the Netherlands, it's basically based on what your friends or your family had, what kind of computer you had. So it could be a Commodore 64, it could be an Atari 8-bit, it could be a ZX Spectrum, it could be some other Amstrad, and everything. There were areas in the Netherlands that those areas used ZX Spectrums, or those areas used the Commodore 64, those areas used the Commodore 16. It's really weird. So there were a lot of clubs in the Netherlands, and every brand you can imagine was used in the Netherlands. And
so it really kind of makes sense to have a home computer museum then, because you've got such a huge choice and variety of computers and people's memories. I was wondering, were people first skeptical about the idea of a home computer museum?
Oh yeah, absolutely. People really said I was crazy. Even my wife. As I just said, by the time I was 16, I had about 40 computers. At that point, I decided to get rid of all of them.
Wow.
Around 16, 17, because I wanted to have a drum kit. And since my whole bedroom was filled with computers, there was no space for a drum kit anymore. So I decided to get rid of all the computers, except for the P2000, C, and the Tandy. Those were the only 2 I kept. I still regret that to today, by the way. So I sold all the things and got myself a drum kit. And then I moved to Helmond, where I'm now still living. And we moved here, and my wife, a friend of hers, lived in a city which is only 40-minute drive from here. A small village, by the way. So we said, let's go for a coffee over there. Sure. So we went there, and the boyfriend of this girl, he collected old game consoles. And by this time I was, out of the whole computer scene, and I still was working in computers. I was still a network administrator. I was doing programming, all this kind of fun things. But I wasn't involved in any retro computers at all. Anyway, this guy, he has his whole garage filled with game consoles. It was really filled to the brim with game consoles. Every game console you can imagine, it was there. Apart from the Amigas. There was no CDTV, there was no CD32. So he showed me all this crazy stuff like the Apple Pippin and the Panasonic 3DO and all kinds of computers I've never seen in my life up until that time. So I asked him, where are the Amigas? And he said, yeah, the Amiga CD-TV is not really a game console. It's like, yeah, but the CD-32 is, absolutely. So he said, yeah, I can't find one. And we're talking about 12 years ago now. So he said, yeah, I couldn't find it. So, we chatted a little bit more. And after a while, we went home, my wife and I. So we drove home and I said to my wife, you know what? I would really like an Amiga. I want an Amiga back. I want to have that atmosphere, the feeling. I want to play these old games, play with some tracker software, doing fun things with it. Yes, sure, go ahead. She still regrets that, Bart. So I, asked around somebody in my friends, perhaps has some Amiga laying around, which I can take over. And a friend of mine responded. He said, yeah, I have an Amiga. I have an Amiga 500 with some games you can have. And I also have an Amiga 4000.
Wow.
But it was broken. So I was really happy knowing, an Amiga 4000. I always wanted to have an Amiga 4000, never had one. So I said, yeah, sure, I'm going to pick it up. So I drove over to his house and I picked up and I entered his house. And his living room was filled with computers, with Amigas. He had 2 Amiga 500 in box. He had an Amiga 4000 tower in box. Everything in perfect mint condition, not yellowed at all. He had tons of software with it, monitors, he had everything. So I had to fill up my car. It was completely filled and I drove home. I called up a friend like, listen, I need your help. I need somebody to get this out of my car because it's way too much. So he came over and he helped me out, pick everything out, put everything in my living room. And then my wife came home. She wasn't too pleased.
I bet it looked like your bedroom when you were a teenager again, did it?
Yeah, something like that. There was no way you could eat there anymore. It was completely filled with Amigas. I had at least 3 Amigas, but a bunch of software and old boxes everywhere. And so, of course, the Amiga 500 just worked, no problem whatsoever. There was a GVP A530, which the 68030 expansion unit with hard disk. So that's also a quite rare item. And this Amiga 4000 tower. And of course, the Amiga 4000 tower, I turned it on. It started up, but it didn't boot. You saw the kickstart screen. So I went on the internet and to my surprise, I could still log into one of the Amiga websites. My account was still there. So I told them, I have this problem and I have no clue what to do now because, it has a SCSI disk and I tried to boot with the Workbench disk, but it failed. So what's wrong? And so people helped me and I found out it had a 68060 CPU board inside. So yes, I got an Amiga 4000 tower for free in box with a 68060 CPU with the 3D, the CyberGrafx 64 3D.
It's quite the score for free, yeah.
For free. So yeah, I found out, okay, this is, but I removed the hard disk and it was a SCSI disk. So I threw the SCSI disk on the floor. I picked it up again, put it in the computer, and it booted from that point on. So yay for SCSI. And that's how I rolled back into the computer world. I started to going to these gatherings of old computers. Taking the Amiga 4000 tower with you is quite a hassle. So eventually I decided, I got rid of one of the Amiga 500 because I don't need 2. One was fine. I got rid of the GVP 530. And with the money I received from that, I bought new computers. Then I found this advertisement on the internet. Somebody saying, I have this collection of computers and I want to get rid of it. So let's do 150. So I sent in €150. And he called me. It's like, yeah, come pick it up. So I went there. And I came in this garage box, again, filled with computers. With 3 Amiga 1200s, an Amiga 600, a bunch of Commodore 64s, MSXs, Ataris. I mean, it was crazy. And I had to take everything for €150. This continued for a while. And I've been to gatherings and all these. And that's where I met you guys for the first time, which was in Amsterdam. So by the time I met you guys in Amiga 30 in 2015, I've had about 400 computers at that time.
That's pretty epic. Like, and I do remember when we first met you, and you were trying to, raise interest in this, which was great. And I was wondering, what then makes it stand out from other museums? I know you call yourself the Interactive Home Computer Museum, and some places they put the machines in there, they're just kind of, you can't touch them, you can't play with them. What really makes a museum unique?
Well, from the beginning, I wanted to have an interactive computer museum. And the reason for that is I wanted to create a museum where people will recognize stuff. So, having a computer museum, call yourself a computer museum, is, for me, way too broad spectrum of stuff. Mm-hmm. Because a computer, a calculator is a computer, but a Tesla is a computer as well. So if you say I'm a computer museum, that means you have to have calculators, you have to have computers,
and probably fridges and stuff and like fridges, that. So, yeah.
Everything that's mobile phones, traffic lights, because they're also computers. So no, that's way too broad spectrum, and that's something I don't like. Make it clear what you want to show. So yeah, home computers was for me pretty much the thing I wanted to do. Because that's the interest I had. I didn't want to make it a game machine, game console machine, or console museum or something like that, because I don't like playing games that much. So I wanted to have something, a computer, a museum that's dedicated for the computer that can be used at home. It, for me also, there's a difference between being a collector and a museum. There's a big difference in that. What I'm always saying, especially when people ask for it, collector collects objects and is limited by space and money. So if a collector can get, 100 Commodore 64s, he will get 100 Commodore 64s. Mm-hmm. And he will try to keep them all. Maybe sell a few, but he will keep the most of it, he will keep for himself. Which is fine. I'm not judging for that. It's fine if that's your thing. A museum is collecting stories and is sharing stories using objects. So that was my thing. I wanted to create a museum where you can actually have fun as a geek, but also fun as not being a geek.
I think it's great because it's kind of like a time machine with some of the stuff that you've done. And, a lot of people will look at it and think, oh, this was my past, but also a lot of kids will kind of learn from it. So one of the kind of things you've done is you've done different bedrooms. And even in the bedrooms, you have like the full experience. So you've got a 90s bedroom with like a LAN with MSN Messenger in there and stuff. Tell us how hard that was to set up and kind of get going and what people's reactions have been.
Well, the MSN is relatively new. That's been in there for 2 months or 3 months now. We found this open source MSN server, and it only works on a particular versions of MSN Messenger. So we had to find that. So that was quite a challenge to find the correct version of Microsoft Messenger that allows you to put another server other than Microsoft in there. And yeah, we create our own server based on that open source software, and we use that one, and that works. And now we are, the thing we're now trying is get AI involved. So we have a few Microsoft Messenger accounts that are online. One is called Clippy. We have Bonzi Buddy. You can actually chat with those, but you get AI as an answer. So we told AI you are Clippy from the 90s, and he will answer.
And he's got Clippy's personality.
Yeah, we gave the personality. So that's what we are trying now. But yeah, we have to, it's a programmer's thing. Never trust input of users. We need to figure out a way to prevent that people are going to make group chats. We tried today, and the bots will get to talk to each other, and there is a limit on answers you can get from AI. So we don't want to be blocked again. So
I was wondering as well what kids' reactions have been going into those bedrooms and kind of like learning their parents' life.
It's usually it's not the kids' reaction. It's usually the parents' reaction. Like, oh, I used to have this. Oh, yeah, this looks like I have this, and I wanted to have this bedroom like back in the day. So every visitor which we have, which enter the museum, for us is of course a visitor, but it's also one extra story, possibly extra story. because what we do is collect stories. And we do this collection with showing the computers in the right environment. So we have the XD Sorcerer, which is from 1978, that actually on a chair, with a chair and on a desk from 1978. There's a wallpaper behind it from 1978. Everything on the desk is 1978. Even inside the desk, everything is 1978. So you can open up the drawers. There's stuff in there that's 1978. The reason we do this is for people, they can come in and, seeing a picture gives you some memories and can allow you to tell stories. Seeing the material in real life even makes this better. So you get more stories, you get more. But actually sitting behind the machine in the correct environment, playing with it, touching it, feeling it, smelling it, all those things combined, that's the ultimate nostalgic feeling you get. So everybody coming in, sitting behind this computer, remembering this nostalgic feeling. And suddenly this computer, and it doesn't matter what kind of computer it is, it's not only a tool that's made of plastic or metal and all the things that are inside computers, but it's a cultural object. Because people, and then they start, remembering everything and start sharing their stories. And that's why we walk around listening to those stories. And you get a lot of stories, I used to have this and I remember this. And you see people, remembering stuff, trying out some stuff, and that's great. And then you get all these memories. And then, I used to work for this, and back in the day, I created this with this computer, and you get this crazy stories. And suddenly, this piece of computer that's just a tool. It's like a hammer, but it's slightly more modern. Suddenly, this is becoming a piece of heritage for at least somebody, and that makes the museum. The stories around these computers makes the museum, and that's why we need everything working. Having everything as much as in the original environment.
I love the fact as well, because I've seen videos of, people can sit down at a mid-90s PC at your museum and you've got like a proxy server where they can type in like yahoo.com and it'll bring it via an archive, and it'll look like you'll get the experience of using what the World Wide Web was like in the mid-90s as well.
Exactly, including dial-up internet.
So do they have to dial up?
Yeah, of course. It's the full experience, and there's nothing.
I miss that experience. I really love just to sit there and just see how long it takes.
Yeah, it will take a while. The best part is you don't get a bill afterwards, so that's good.
Well, talk us through some of the other highlights of what people can experience there as well. Because are there any like particular exhibitions or machines that people are most drawn to? Then, what's kind of the stuff that people run to first of all?
Well, it really depends on what people already know about the museum. You start with it if you enter the museum, you pay the €10.24 entrance fee, and we'll just guide you for the first time. We'll guide you through the museum. This is an interactive museum. You can touch everything except for the personnel. We don't like that. And the signs next to the computers are, one side is Dutch, the other side is English, and there's a QR code on it you can scan, you get more in-depth information. We have a free Wi-Fi you can use for that. And you enter the 70s. So basically every computer around you is 70s and screams out 70s. Everything is in the right environment. From the 70s, you go to the 1984 area, which is the largest area. And all these computers, there's actually this part of the museum is the only one that has some kind of connection between the computers. So we have based it on CPU. You have to know that, but the Z80 is put together, the 6502, the Intel, all those computers are together, set together. And on the left side, there's only Dutch computers, for example. So you have all these crazy Dutch computers we had. And of course, the Commodore 64, and all these computers are working and are playing games, because mostly we put games on it because that's the most interactive you can find. We tried to do, text editors, but nobody really going sit down and, let's make a document now. So that doesn't work. And in the next area, the most, people drawn to either the Commodore 64 is really always popular. Sometimes the BBC computer, also one of the more popular ones, the SX64. We have this Apple II, which is doing some music program, which is kind of fun to see. People are always reading the signs next to the Holborns, which are the ET lookalike computers. Yeah, we have the largest collection of them in the world. We have 5. There's nowhere else in the world there are 5 Holborn computers, born in Holland, which are the weird-looking computers in the museum. But one of the biggest attractions we currently have, is the Estatos. It's a big design computer. It's absolutely not a home computer.
It's huge, isn't it? It's like a giant desk, and then you've got all the monitors in there as well. Yeah,
it's 6 monitors, 3 big colors, 21 inches, and
it looks like a control board for a TV studio or something.
Yeah, Star Trek is also named for it. Yeah, that's one of the biggest attractions. People see that computer and are attracted to it, and usually get distracted by the Sinclair C5, which is also in the same area. But eventually they see this computer, and we can tell whole stories about it. Actually, we are thinking of creating some kind of big story around it, maybe even a movie, because it's a crazy story.
And that's a very unique Dutch item as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Only 7 of them are remaining today that we know of, at least, and we have the only one that's working because we have repaired it. So we have the technical knowledge to get it working again. And we can tell about all these stories about, especially from the UK. We got most of our stories from the UK, oddly enough.
I think another thing that I saw as well was software. So interestingly, I saw on your Twitter, you had a 6-meter truck with the world's largest PC games collection arriving. That must have been like a crazy day. And what have you done with this stuff as well?
We put it in nice display cases. So yeah, that's a collection from a guy called Anne Bras, and he collected all this stuff, all these games. We counted them. It's slightly over 2,200 boxes that are on display. We haven't calculated his storage unit yet, and he moved it in 2020. He moved it to the Netherlands, to the HomeComputerMuseum, and we put it in nice display cases, which was also kind of fun. It was in the middle of the pandemic, and we just called a display case company maker and said, how busy are you guys? And we're like, no, not that busy. Again, it was 2020. It was right in the middle of the start of the pandemic. They said, good, I'll take 33 of them. Like, what? Yeah, and then at first they were hesitant, like, yeah, but you don't get subsidy, right? I said, I don't get subsidy, but don't worry about that. I'll pay. So they delivered in November of 2020. And that's when we put all these display cases together. We let Anne Bras put everything in because, it's really an important collection. It's in the Guinness World Record book as well, the same collection.
Nice.
So we absolutely need to treat that as with gloves on and make sure the boxes are kept perfectly fine. It's also inside. There's no light coming to it, at least not sunlight. It's the temperature is stable. So in that way we are actually a museum suddenly.
I also think with the amount of not only software but also hardware that you're maintaining and keeping it up and running, and with systems that are usable by the public, I imagine that they require quite a lot of maintenance as well. And I'm wondering, do you ever kind of use modern peripherals to keep these machines up and running? For example, like other like Raspberry Pis inside some of them that help out and do certain functions, or how does that kind of work then? Or are you using all period authentic stuff?
Since we have to turn on 250 computers every day, we try to do it as fast as possible.
Yeah,
that means we try to keep the machine as original as possible. Let's say the Commodore 64 we have in the museum is fully original from the inside. There's nothing. The only thing we added is some heating metal thingies on the to make sure the chips are being kept slightly cooler than normal.
Yeah.
So that we added to it, but it's a fully original. We put the Ultimate 2 Plus is in there because for us, if we need to start up every Commodore 64 we have by tape or by disk, it takes too long. So we
I could imagine, having heat sinks on there in a hot day is kind of essential with some of those older machines. Yeah,
we try to keep it as original as possible. For example, the pad. We have a 1978 pad, early 78 even. That's again, from the inside, it's original, except for some heat sinks and the memory, because most technology is terrible at creating memory, especially after 40 years. The memory is just gone. So we replaced all the memory banks with basically one chip. That's over 2, so it does do 8 kilobytes. Outside the machine, there's nothing, and you can turn it on. It works perfectly fine. It works as original as it is. But we try to make it easier for us without changing too much of the hardware. So we don't put Raspberry Pis inside of the computers, because we can technically remove the entire museum, put Raspberry Pis in it with emulators, and it will be exactly the same. But that's not our goal. Our goal is, have the original stuff over there. But it has to be convenient for the current time. So, power supplies. Sometimes we have a more modern power supply on a computer, because most power supplies you don't see. So either the way the computer works shouldn't be different than it originally was, nor should the outside look different from originally.
So the user can't tell the experience is the same, yeah.
Exactly. And we can still, for the Commodore 64, there is a data set next to it, and there is a working floppy disk next to it. So people can actually, turn off the computer, remove the Ultimate 2, turn on the computer, and turn on the disk drive, and use it as is. And it's perfectly original. So we do try to do some modern stuff, but only if it's necessary to do so. For example, the XT, the late 80s computers, the IBM PC compatibles, they're all MFM hard disks. Well, they're dead. It's that simple. There's no way you can revive those or keep them alive.
They're not making any more either. Yeah,
it's a moving part, and a moving part wears out. So all those disks are removed, and there's an XT IDE inside, or some IDE to CF card solution, something like that. So, and again, if there's a hard disk that still works, we'll try to use the hard disk as long as possible.
I was wondering as well, like, the whole retro thing. I've seen you've got pictures of a Sinclair C5 as well, and some other cool devices. There's a few like mobile phones and different things like that. I was wondering, like, have you ever ridden it out in public on the bike paths in the Netherlands? And also, do people also react to this like retro tech that you generally have around?
I did try to, I think twice now, three times. I drove 3 times to my house, or at least I tried to drive to my house with the C5. But first of all, it's very uncomfortable to drive. And my battery was halfway dead. Like, okay, I'm turning back now because I need to bike. But people, they looked at me. That's the only thing I tried at some point. But then again, my regular car I use for the museum is a 1993 Chevy van, so a big American V8. So that's also head turning, especially when I open up my my exhaust a little bit.
And also kind of retro.
Yeah, it's kind of retro.
Ravi, to touch on there as well, that you do have a quite a cool collection of mobile phones as well. And that's quite nice to see because, I mean, for the last 15 years, like kind of since the iPhone, it feels like, you look at, all phones now are kind of these black glass monoliths. There's not too much variation in terms of the way they're used, for example. But, often when we do our patrons' hangouts, someone will bring up like a weird old Nokia model, or they'll talk about an old Motorola. And I think that question of like, what was your first mobile phone? It always gets people's memories working. And do you find that people are actually drawn to that then? And do you think that's something that definitely deserves a focus? Because whenever I go to technology museums, they don't really focus too much on like cell phones or mobile phones.
No, we only have one big display case with them now. Because, it is part of the history of the home computer, because it's probably the way we are going to. But we only have one display case showing off these mobile phones, and from the early ones till basically the iPhone. iPhone 4 is, I think, the newest we have in there. Maybe some Microsoft material. So, people are attracted to that. But it's, again, we're not a museum that's for telecom or that's for mobile phones. So we only show it, and we are proud of it, and we have some things around it. It's also a fun story that actually one of the phones, I think it was 2020, one of the phones that was off, it was Nokia, suddenly started to ring.
Oh, wow.
That's scary. In the display case, suddenly this phone started to ring, which was an alarm. Somebody set an alarm on that day in 2020. And this alarm went off while the phone was off. So that was kind of scary. But still a fun story.
You know what people joke about that, don't they? That Nokia's kept their charge for 10 years. So it obviously was true, yeah.
It is true. We've actually seen it.
I was wondering, also as piracy helped preserve software in a way, because obviously we don't condone piracy, but a lot of this old kind of software, some of it might have been lost, and being able to see copies of it or bring it back to life must be really interesting from your perspective.
Actually, we in a few months ago, 2 months ago I think, we put the really large collection of illegal software in the museum on display. And not only software, but also illegal music and illegal movies. Because basically we put the Piracy Museum inside the Home Computer Museum. And it's 1,200 CDs or 1,200 media carriage things. So there's also cassettes, DVDs and CDs. And what we tell around it, yes, there's a huge loss of illegal software back in the day. But you can also think of it in another way. How many people started out with illegal use of, let's say, Adobe Photoshop? And because they are using it illegally, they could use it fully and eventually maybe become a designer or some artist that is using Photoshop and is now able to actually pay for Photoshop. So I think saying that a loss back in the 90s at least, there was a big loss on software piracy, but maybe that loss over in a few years, like now, isn't that big as they said back in the day it was. And that's an interesting way of thinking. How many people discovered bands or movies even because they bought this illegal disc or media or DVD and watched this movie? Like, hey, this is a nice movie. Maybe you should watch more of this director or this company.
Yeah, I was in the California Computer Museum and the computer history one there, and they had a whole section on Napster. That was really interesting to see as well, because I discovered music through there, and it's really connected with the whole computing world, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And funny enough, we have Napster also working in the Home Computer Museum. So yeah, we have working Napster, so you can illegally download stuff in the Home Computer Museum. Funny enough, when we put that on the social media, we are very active on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok even, OnlyFans we have, so we have everything you want. Anyway, we put, yeah, it's not a joke. We actually have an OnlyFans.
Right, I believe it, yeah.
It can be used for creative things as well.
I've heard that, yeah.
So we put up that we have this illegal, we have Napster running. So we showed off that we have Napster running. And I'm not joking, 2 days later, we got a surprise visit from Brein, which is the company that's protecting the rights of the entertainment industry in the Netherlands. And they came in to check us out. Because if we were doing something illegally, it was like, it was an anonymous tip that somebody gave.
Wow.
Like, no, guys, you're looking on our Instagram. No, we're not. Yeah, sure. We didn't do anything wrong. Like, yeah,
are you downloading Metallica songs on Napster? Yeah.
Yeah, and what are you going to do with it? I mean, there's not USB sticks or anything like that work on these old computers anyway. So, no, it was fun. They laughed about it, and we were doing everything perfectly fine, so nobody could say anything about it.
Yeah, imagine like the authorities, like, we've had a tip off someone's using Napster in this, and they'll be like, oh my god.
In 2024, great, yeah, it's great.
But I think, rightly or wrongly, piracy, it is a big part of computing history.
It is. It is.
So I think it's very important that you do cover it.
I mean, in the end, the demo scene is also, came from that one. And which in 2023 became part of the UNESCO. And the official signing was actually in the Home Computer Museum as well. So we actually have that original certificate that it's a UNESCO now, and so we have UNESCO inside the Home Computer Museum as well.
So it's recognized as culturally part of the heritage of the Netherlands. Yeah,
that's incredible.
Well, worldwide actually, it's the fourth one. In the Netherlands, that's for the Netherlands, but it's the fourth country that does that. We were the fourth.
I'm thinking, is there anything, kind of what your plans are? And is there anything like it's kind of your holy grail? Like, would you love to have a certain type of system displayed there, or anything that you really would love to have?
We're going to take over the world. No. Well, I don't think that's. Of course, we have stuff we want. Let's be clear. There's a lot of stuff I still want as for computers. Things like the Sharp X68000 is something I really want that one, or the CompuColor 2. And that's also a computer which I really want. But they are even or very expensive to get or impossible to buy at all. They're like the CompuColor. I've been looking for it for 6 years and I still haven't found it. And I don't think will ever be a complete computer museum or a complete home computer museum. It's impossible to do. I think for the way we are doing it right now, we are dedicated to the home computer. So a computer should be used at home, or should be made for home use, or should be of influence on the way we use computers today. Yeah. That's the rule we state. So it's either one of those two. So an IBM 5150, that's not a home computer. It's not meant to be a home computer. It's a business computer. But you cannot deny the influence the IBM 5150 had on modern computers today. Yeah, that's why we still have the 5150. And the same for an Apple Lisa, and the same for a Next Cube. But we have a second rule, which is not very known, but we have one of the rules we said, it should be sold in the Netherlands at some point. Just to prevent that we get all these Russian and Yugoslavian and African and Brazilian computers which nobody ever heard of in the Netherlands. Not saying that we don't accept them if we're getting donated, but we're not looking for them. So we have a quite nice selection of Russian computers and Ukrainian even computer and weird computers that were never for sale in the Netherlands, but we were given those. So yeah, that's fine.
It sounds like absolute heaven. I think me and Dan need to definitely get ourselves along to there. And, I was wondering what your future plans are as well for the place, if you have any.
So far, we exist now for 6.5 years. And now we are on the edge of starting Home Computer Museum 4.0, which is because so far we haven't been subsidized at all. Well, €3,000 a year. So I don't call that subsidy. It's just like, here you have some money, have a cookie. And we don't have big sponsors. So everything we do, everything we build so far is literally by ourselves. So we earn the money by repairing stuff, by doing digital heritage, by selling tickets for the museum, doing tours, all that kind of stuff. So that's how we made money. There have been some research to the Home Computer Museum quite recently. I'm talking about the last 2 months. There have been 3 separate reports given to the city of Helmond. All 3 of them state on paper, black and white, and with 3 completely separate researches, and all 3 said the Home Computer Museum is the only one that's the biggest touristic attraction of Helmond and should be subsidized no matter what. So that gives us a very interesting place to be now. The city did a research on what to do, how to make it more professional, and there some things came out. So we need the current museum building we have, it's okay. It's in the middle of the city. It's a lovely building. It's great. There's parking places around it, so there's always everything. It's paid parking though. That's the only disadvantage. Close to a train station, but we are. They think it looks too much like a shop. So there need to be some changes to the building, and it's mostly inside. So the museum experience itself should be better, should be improved. So that's one of the things they said. And they said, okay, we're going to send you some money for that, and we're going to subsidize you. so you can build out the museum, make it more professional, make it more better museum experience, and you can grow to 10,000 visitors a year. And then in about 5 years from now, the city of Helmond is advised to build a brand new building for the Home Computer Museum, outside the city center, to host the entire museum. And we'll be able to build up from scratch the museum, because there are things we've learned from the past. Okay, this is going to work, this is not going to work. So we want to improve on that. We want to...
So it's going to get bigger and better.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
nice.
Please give us subsidy, because now we have this chance, and we are confident that we can grow within 5 years to the 25,000 visitors. Actually, I think that we can do more, but, keep it safe for now.
I've got no doubt that you will, Bart, and it's incredible that the city's getting behind you as well. And I think, anyone that hasn't had a trip to the Netherlands, it's a wonderful place to visit. And absolutely, if you're in the area, come along to the museum and check out not only what you've got on offer right now, which is incredible, but obviously these huge future plans that you've got as well. So if you want to find out a bit more, Bart, what's the best place to look then? I mean, you mentioned all your social media accounts. I haven't signed up to your OnlyFans yet. I think it'd be amazing if your OnlyFans was literally pictures of like CPU coolers and PC fans. I'm hoping to find some of those on there.
We do that, yes. That's the only thing we do. We don't do it. We actually have 1 follower, so that's good.
Is your website the best place then for people to find out more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. The website is a good place, a good target place. We are very active on social media, so you can find it. And probably next week or something, we are going to announce a crowdfunding, so probably Kickstarter, to help us, grow in this new building, because either the city will say yes or no, but we need more money anyway to improve the museum as we have and make it into. Right now, our current visitors are geeks. I can be honest about that. I mean, they're people who like old computers, which is fine, and I respect them. I love them. I want those people. But I also want the mothers with children. Yeah, we need to get that, because we want to grow to 25,000 visitors a year. And we need some investment right now. So we think with the crowdfunding, we can do that. So that will be announced somewhere next week.
Fantastic. Well, obviously, I'll link up your website in our show notes so people can click through. And then if you... We spot that link next week, send it over to us, we'll put it on our socials as well, so people that hopefully can help you out, Bart, and support the place, because I think what you're doing is just so important, and obviously, computing is such a big part of our life now, so the fact that you are preserving these memories and, the machines and the experiences, I think is just incredible. So best of luck with the future, and thank you so much for coming on and doing a bit of reminiscing with us this week. It's been wonderful to talk to you as always, Bart.
Yeah, thank you for having me over.